Hi everyone. So welcome to the stream today. Very much excited for having you on the part 3 or the session 3 for the preparation towards the ICAG November 2020 examination as we're looking at introduction to management accounting. I hope that you've been following the series so far on Monday, then on yesterday, and then today as well. Now, in case you missed the part 1 on part 2, the link is in the description to this video, and you can watch the part 1 that was on Monday and the part 2 that was on yesterday. Then you could watch this one as well. That will build your knowledge under that. So we're looking at introduction to management accounting, and we've considered or discussed a couple of issues so far in relation to what is cost accounting, what is management accounting. We've looked at the objectives of cost accounting. We've discussed the issue about what we mean when we talk about the differences between management accounting and then financial reporting. We've also spent some time to look at the issue in relation to how we classify costs. So we looked at cost classification by nature, by behavior, by controllability, production, non-production, all of those things. We've discussed that. Then we looked at how the high and low method can also be used to split total cost into its component, that is the fixed cost, and then variable cost, and then how step cost can also be built into the system in relation to that. So we've looked at all of these things and discussed these aspects as well. So I see some of you joining the stream. Welcome to the stream. You give us a thumbs up on the video when you join. That way we get more engagement on the video and we will be able to reach as many students as possible. But most importantly, comment in the chat box any questions that you have for me, and then what topics you would want me to look at next, what topics you would want me to cover next. Today we're going to be concluding on the introduction to management accounting, and then tomorrow go into something else. So comment in the chat box any questions that you have for me as we continue our discussion. Right, so I see some of you smashing the like button. Thank you very much. I see some of you smashing the like button. Thank you very much. And comment in the chat box any questions that you have for me that you want us to cover, or you want me to share my thoughts on real quick as we continue with our discussion. So today we want to look at, still in the introduction to management accounting, and one of the things that we've been talking about since Monday is the issue about how do we call it? Overheads. So today we want to spend the time to look at some treatment of overheads. We'll be looking at overhead absorption, overhead allocation, and overhead apportionment, how we can calculate the overhead absorption rates and use that to determine the total cost of a product or process or an undertaking. So we're going to be looking at all of those things as well today. So comment in the chat box. Let me know where you are watching from, who you are. Let me know. Let's see which of you are online. Patience, Nana Atrem, Laila, or Lily, sorry, and Mustafa. Let's see the people online. Let's see the people online real quick. Aaron, Ousu, and San, I see you. You said thanks, Nhyira. Thank you very much, Aaron, for joining the stream. It's always a pleasure coming your way on the live stream. So let's go accounting for overheads. Accounting for overheads. Now, you have to understand that this is one of the fundamental areas in management accounting. If you don't understand anything that we've done so far, that is on Monday, on Tuesday, yesterday, and then on today, today is going to be very critical, because whatever we're going to be doing here is going to go into preparation of the cost sheet or the profit statement, either using the marginal costing school of thought or the absorption costing school of thought. So this is going to be a very critical area that you want to make sure you pay very much attention to. NS Ampofo, I see you. You are welcome to the stream. Patience, I see you. All right. You are welcome. Ezekiel Kojo Baden, I see you. Hi, Ezekiel. I hope you're doing well. And put it in the chat box. Any questions you have for me, smash the like button as well on the video as we get into the discussion for today. So accounting for overheads, accounting for overheads. Now, we've defined overheads already, right, as the summation of all indirect costs. So when we bring indirect material, indirect labor, and indirect expenses, that together gives us the overheads. Now, in dealing with overheads, there are two schools of thoughts that you need to understand. So there are two schools of thought. Look at how I'm even spelling school. Oh, Nhyira. School of thoughts that we need to understand when it comes to accounting for overheads or treatment of overheads. There is what is called the absorption costing school of thought, and then the marginal costing school of thought. So when it comes to accounting for overheads, how we account for overheads, how we deal with overheads, how we charge overheads, then we need to look at the issue in relation to these two schools of thought. Either we are dealing with the absorption costing school of thought or the marginal costing school of thought. Marfo, Ajay, I see you. You are welcome to the stream. Then Patience is saying that, please, sir, the network keeps breaking. Is it my end or your end? Is anyone else having a breakage in the feed? Is it my end or from your end? Maybe someone else can indicate whether we are having breakages in the feed. Yeah, Mustafa, I see you. You are welcome to the stream. I don't think I'm supposed to have breakages in the feed though. Okay, so Ezekiel said the feed is all right from here. Okay, so Patience, it could be your network, right? It could be your network because I'm not having baffling here on my feed. So you could check the network from your end, and then you'll be able to stay with us well. So there are two schools of thought, and that is the absorption costing and then the marginal costing. Very two key things that we need to understand: absorption costing and then marginal costing. Now, what is the absorption costing about? In a simple language, the objective of absorption costing is to include in the total cost of a product an appropriate share of the organization's total revenue. What do we mean? Absorption costing, that is the objective of absorption costing, is to include in the total cost an appropriate share of the total overheads of the organization, of the total overheads of the organization. What it means then is that in the absorption school of thought, all overheads are going to be included when we are determining the total cost of a product. Now, even though there are these two schools of thought, that is marginal costing and absorption costing, preferably entities are required to use the absorption costing school of thought. Why? Because the absorption costing school of thought is supported also by IAS2 accounting for inventory. Now, under IAS2, the cost of inventory must include all the factory costs incurred in the production of the product, in that case, in the production of the product. So really, if we want to determine the cost of a product, if we want to determine the cost of a process, what we're going to be looking for is what? To allocate an appropriate share of the overheads to the total cost of the product, and that is done better in the absorption costing school of thought. Nonetheless, there is also marginal costing, where you are just going to be looking at the variable factory cost and not considering the fixed factory cost in the determination of the cost of production of a product. I hope it makes sense. Now, we're going to be looking at absorption costing for the start, and then build our knowledge on that very well. So let's look at absorption costing. Like we mentioned, the objective of absorption costing is simply to include in the total cost of the products or an appropriate share of the total overheads of an organization. Okay, That is our objective. That is our goal when we are using the absorption costing. However, when it comes to using the absorption costing to deal with overheads, there are different bases that we can use to allocate overheads. There are different bases that we can use to allocate overheads. So let's look at it. Absorption of overheads in general goes through 3 steps. Absorption of overheads goes through 3 steps or 3 stages. So let's look at the stages of absorption costing. So we have the overhead allocation, overhead absorption, and then overhead apportionment. Overhead allocation, overhead absorption, and overhead apportionment. So when we say allocation of overheads, what do we mean? In a simple language, allocation is the process by which a whole cost item is charged directly to a cost center or a cost unit. The process by which a whole cost item is charged to a particular cost center or cost unit. So the process of charging a particular cost to a cost center or cost unit is what referred to as what? The overhead allocation. The overhead allocation. So for instance, we can have examples such as this. A production department to which production overheads are charged. So production overheads, where are we supposed to charge it? To the production department. That is called allocation of overheads. Then a production area service department to which production overheads are charged. That's also another example. Then an administrative department to which administrative overheads are charged. So when we are dealing with the administrative department, then administrative overheads would have to be charged directly to that particular department, and that is called allocation of overhead. So the process of charging a whole cost item to a specific cost center or cost unit is what we refer to as overhead allocation. And that's the first thing you need to understand. Okay, so patient said, thanks, sir. All right, so I hope you resolve your issue. Inshallah, Peter said, good day, sir. Hope I'm not late. Yep, you are not too late. David Apau. Hi, David. I see you. You're welcome to the stream. When you join the stream, consider to smash the like button. That way we get more engagement on the video, and YouTube will be able to push the video so we can reach as many students as possible. But most importantly, I want you to comment in the chat box any questions that you have for me, what topics you would want me to cover as we continue with our discussion towards the ICAG November 2020 examination, and also to assist you in other various subjects that you are preparing for. So that is overhead allocation. So let's come to the second one, overhead apportionment. Overhead apportionment. So what is overhead apportionment? Apportionment is a procedure whereby indirect costs are spread fairly between cost centers. Apportionment is the process whereby indirect costs are spread fairly between cost centers. Where indirect costs are spread fairly between cost centers. But the question we then ask ourselves is, how do we spread fairly the indirect costs between the cost centers? What do we use? So we're going to look at some overheads and some basis of what? Apportionment. Okay? So I'm going to give you some examples of overheads and basis of apportionment. So overhead cost and then basis of apportionment. So if you want to charge something to a particular cost center or cost unit, how do we go about that? So we're going to have the overhead item, then we find out how that can be what? Shared between the cost centers. So let's see. One, we can talk about depreciation. So maybe let me divide like this. Depreciation, insurance cost, depreciation, insurance cost, repairs and maintenance cost, etc. All these can be shared using the cost or value of the machine. Okay, so if we are looking at depreciation, then we look at the value or the cost of the machine that each department is having. Then we use that as the basis to what? Spread the overhead for the department or for the various departments. Then insurance cost, the same thing. You use the value of the asset. Now, be careful here. Sometimes repair and maintenance, we could use hours. Okay, repair and maintenance hours to share the cost. But where we don't have repair and maintenance hours, then we could as well use the value of the asset or the cost of the asset to be able to share it efficiently or fairly in that case. 2. Building depreciation. All right. Insurance cost, and everything about building, we could either use the floor area occupied, so floor occupied, or sometimes the cost of the building. For instance, if we are insuring our building, the insurance company will look at what? The cost of the building, and then other risk factors to be able to determine how much cost we're going to be incurring. So if we have now paid that insurance expenses and we are finding out how that can be allocated between the cost centers and the cost units, then we will use the floor area, either the cost of each of the building or each of the floors, or we use the floor area that they are occupying. Why? Because one department might be occupying a larger floor area than another department, or one department might be occupying a huge aspect of the building at a higher cost, whilst other departments may not be occupying as much as that. So that is the second thing you must understand: the floor area occupied or the cost of the building. Next one, canteen cost. Canteen cost. Now, when it comes to allocation or allocating canteen cost, we can either use the number of employees in each department, okay, or one that is most likely to be used will be the number of meals served. Number of meals served. Why is that important? Because you see, there are some departments that the workers there may be just 2 people or 3 people, but they eat a lot. So maybe everybody's supposed to take 1 bowl or 1 meal, 1 pack of meal. They will take 2 or 3. So if you use the number of employees to allocate, you realize that they are eating more, but you're going to be charging them what? Less than what they are supposed to have been charged. However, if you use the number of meals served and count the meal that each department is having, that could also be used to be able to allocate the overhead expenses. So that is the thing you need to understand there. Canteen cost or welfare cost of employees, all these can be allocated using either the number of employees in each department or the number of meals served. Then let me also add a couple of them. There we go. Electricity cost. How can we share electricity? Electricity can be shared if we have the issue in relation to number of bulbs, okay, that is being used in each department, number of bulbs that is being used in each department. But sometimes the bulbs doesn't give us a good thing, so we can look at the machine horsepower, Okay, so the horsepower of the machines that they are using could also be used. Maybe this machine uses 200 kilowatts per hour, 20 kilowatts per hour. Then we could do those computation and then we use that to allocate the overheads. Patient said, I love the eating bits and the number of meals saved. That's true, right? Because you can have 2 people or 3 people in a department and they eat more than 20 people in another department. You got it? Because they like food, and food is good though. So that is electricity, number of bulbs, or we're looking at the machine horsepower of the equipment that we are using. Then store costs. Okay, store costs. So we have a store department, and we've incurred some cost at the store of the organization. So how do we allocate the store cost? We allocate the store cost using the number of requisitions or material, number of requisitions or materials issued. Number of requisitions or materials issued. So that is also something that you need to understand there. Gloria Mai, I see you. You are welcome to the stream. So that is the idea about that. So we have a store, okay, and we keep everything in the store. Now, the store cost, no, we have incurred a cost there. How do we share that? How do we ensure that everybody is having everything there? So we share that by looking at what? The number of requisitions that each department made from the store during the period under consideration, or the number of materials that have been issued from the store to the various departments under consideration. So these are some examples of overhead costs and what? The basis of apportionment. So what are we saying? With overhead apportionment, it refers to the spread of the overhead expenses fairly between the cost centers. And how do we do that spread? How do we do the sharing? We do that by looking at some basis of apportionment, and that is what we have gone through real quick on that. Christiana, I see you, Christy. You are welcome to the stream. More or less like you are late a little bit today, but I hope you're doing well. So I'm going to snap this. And I'm going to post it on my Instagram page so that for those of you who follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to get this as well to either write or look at in more detail. And Instagram is also a place you need to follow me at, so you get a meeting details every day on what we're going to be discussing. All right. So allocation, the process of charging a whole item of overhead to a particular cost center or cost unit. Then 2, apportionment, the spreading of the overhead cost between the cost centers or cost units. But the spread has to be done fairly, okay? The spread has to be done fairly. So what basis do we use to do that? And that is to look at what? These things. Now, there is what is called the overhead analysis sheet that we could prepare in order to do this allocation. I'm going to just put the pro forma down, and we will not solve any question really on that. And I'm believing that you'll be able to get some questions to solve on that. So let's put the pro forma of the overhead analysis sheet down. Hi, Eureka. I see you. You are welcome. I hope you're doing well. So let's look at the pro forma of the overhead analysis sheet, or overhead analysis sheet. Let's just keep it that way. So we could bring overhead cost here. Okay. Then that's too big, that's too big, that's too big. Then we'll bring basis of apportionment. Then we're going to have the total here. Then we might have production department. Let's say we have maybe 3 production department. And that's going to be A, B, and then C, all right? A, B, C. And then let's say we have service department here. So let's say we have 2 service departments. Can we see that? And that is service department 1, service department 2. So this is the pro forma for the preparation of the overhead analysis sheet. So whatever it is, a data will be provided to us, and then based on the data provided, we'll be able to solve the question. So let me just give you a freestyle on how that is done. So for instance, let's say we have electricity, and that is say $400,000. Electricity, $400,000. Then let's say that, you remember we said electricity, we can use the horsepower of the machine or number of bulbs, okay? So let's just do number of bulbs. So let's say A, B, C, and then service 1, service 2. So let's say the number of bulbs they have, A has, let's say 50, B has 30, C has 40, 1 has 2, and then this has 5, okay? So we have the cost element. So that's what we're going to be writing here, electricity. Okay, so how are we sharing that electricity? That is the basis of apportionment. So we're going to be using in this illustration number of bulbs. Okay, that we are having. How much are we sharing in total? That is $400,000. So now we apportion the $400,000 between them in their ratios that we have there. So I have my Casio calculator in here. So let's add it up. So we could do that mentally. That's going to be 90, 120, or 127 in total. Am I right on that? 70, 120, yeah, 127. So now we're going to share the 400,000 between the departments here. So let's go. That's going to be 50 over 127 times 400,000. That is going to be 157,480. And then we go to the next one, 30. And that is going to be 94. I'm working to the nearest thousand. 94,488. Then we go to 40. We're going to have 40 there. 40 is going to be 125,984. Okay. Then service department 1 would take 2. Only 2 bulbs. They don't do much there. 6299. And then 5 over 127 times 400,000. That's 15,748. All right. So you get the idea. You get the idea, right? So that is how the overhead analysis sheet or the overhead absorption, the overhead analysis sheet is prepared. So we take the cost item, we look at the basis of apportionment, then we what? Allocate. But the sweet spot is that at the end of the day, the service department exists to serve the production department. So at the end of the period, we need to reapportion the service cost to the production cost. Okay? We need to reapportion the service cost to the production cost. And that is also something that you need to look out for. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to be really spending time on this, but that is the idea. Now, reapportionment simply means that you will take this, for instance, 6299, and then come and reshare it between the departments here if you want to. 1, 2, 3. Now, what basis do we use to reshare? That will always be given in the question. That service costs are reapportioned as follows: 40% for A, 30% for B, and then 30% for C. So based on that, we will share all the service costs between the production department. Then we'll get a total cost for each of the departments respectively. So this is what we mean by overhead apportionment. I hope you get the idea, you get a concept. Any questions, please put it in the chat box for me, and then consider also to smash the like button in case you've not liked the video yet. That way we get more engagement on the video. So I'm going to snap this as well, and then we're going to post it on the Instagram, so you could write it as well later on. Let me put a heading on it. Overhead analysis sheets. Okay, so we've looked at allocation, we've looked at apportionment. Now let's come to the real deal, and that is going to be the absorption. The absorption. So let's look at overhead absorption. Any questions, you put it in the chat box for me. So overhead absorption. Now follow me carefully here, because this is where I'm going to be dropping the bomb, but that you need to pass the exams, especially dealing with absorption costing, which is a critical aspect. So overhead absorption can be defined as the process whereby overhead costs allocated and apportioned to production centers are added to units, job, or batch costs. Let's say that again. Overhead absorption is the process whereby overhead costs allocated and apportioned to production cost centers are added to units, job, or batch costs. Okay, so the process involved in adding the overhead that has been allocated, the overhead that has been charged to a particular cost center or cost unit, to the unit we've produced, to the job we've undertaken, or to a batch, is what we call overhead absorption. Now, overheads are going to be absorbed using what is referred to as the overhead recovery rate, or if you want, the overhead absorption rate. So OAR, overhead absorption rate. Other times it is called the overhead recovery rate. Okay, so any of them can be used in a scenario, and you should be able to note or know what is actually happening in there. So overhead absorption rate or overhead recovery rate. But a big question we ask ourselves is, how do we compute the overhead absorption rate or the overhead recovery rate? There are usually 4 steps we go through in the computation of this, and then adding the cost ultimately to the product. 1, we estimate the overhead that is likely to be incurred. In other words, you determine the budgeted overheads. So we determine the budgeted overheads That is the overheads that is expected to be incurred in the coming period or in the coming budget period for the organization. Then 2, we estimate the activity level for the period. So after you determine the budgeted overhead, you need to determine what? The activity level for the period. Now, when we say activity level here, it could be in hours, that is in labor hours. It could be in hours in machine terms. It could be about material cost. It could be about labor cost. Whatever it is, we determine what? The activity level. So step 1, you determine or estimate the cost you are expecting to incur, and that is the budgeted overheads. And then number 2, you estimate the activity level expected to be undertaken during that budgeted period. Then you divide, okay? You divide the budgeted overheads with the budgeted activity. That is what gives you the overhead absorption rate. Then you now absorb it using the rate. So your overhead absorption rate is going to be equal to your budgeted overheads. Let's put it this way: total budgeted overheads divided by total budgeted activity level. So that is the overhead absorption rate. So once you compute this overhead absorption rate, you can now use that rate to absorb the total cost. Okay, you can now use that rate to absorb the total cost. But like I said, there are bases for the absorption of overhead. To be specific, there are 6 bases for the absorption of overhead. So let's look at absorption of overheads on the basis of absorption of overheads. Remember, overheads can be absorbed using direct material cost, direct labor cost, prime cost, or labor hours, machine hours, and then production units. So there are 6 bases of absorption of overheads. So let's go through the 6 bases, and then let's find out how realistic these bases are and when we can use which bases for what purpose to be used or for it to be used in that case. So basis of absorption of overheads. So like I mentioned, 6, and we're going to be going through all of them. So number 1, absorbing overheads using the direct material cost. So if we are absorbing overheads using the direct material cost, what does that mean? It means that our overhead absorption rate is going to be equal to the total budgeted overheads divided by total budgeted direct material cost times 100. Now, this is where it becomes interesting. The ones with cost items are expressed in percentages. What it means is that our answer is going to be X% of direct material cost. So the overhead absorption rate, according to direct material, our answer will be X% of direct material cost. Now, how do we use that practically? So let me explain it to you. So in a question, the examiner will give us the budgeted information and then the actual information. So for illustration purposes, let's just say that our budgeted overheads, okay, is whatever, let's say $400,000. So this is our budgeted information. And then direct material costs are, let's say for the budget purposes, that is 60,000. Let's say direct labor cost for the budget purposes, let's say 100,000. Okay. Then whatever, machine hours. I'm not going to do all of them though, but machine hours, let's say 20,000 hours. Labor hours, let's say 10,000 hours. Okay. Production unit, let's say 25,000 units. So these are budgeted information. Okay, these are budgeted information. Then let's look at the actual information given to us. On the actual level, Direct material cost, it's say $42,000. Direct labor cost, it's say $82,000. Okay, and machine hours on the actual level is 15,000 hours. Labor hours on the actual level, it's let's say 8,200 hours. Then the production unit on the actual level, let's say that's 27,500 hours. So these are the information we have, okay? And we're going to be working out with this information in that case. Now, so what do we do? If we are absorbing overheads, now in the preparation of the cost card, this is how we go. We bring the direct material cost, and on the actual level, that's 42,000. Then we bring direct labor cost, and that is how much? 82,000. We add that up, and that gives us what? The prime cost. And the prime cost is going to be 42, 82, that is going to be 124,000. Okay, that's our prime cost. If you remember, when I was giving you the pro forma for the cost sheets, I think on Monday, as we were looking at classification of costs according to nature, looking at the elements of cost, I gave you the pro forma of the cost sheets. If you remember clearly, I told you that after the prime cost, we bring factory overheads. And the factory overheads, I told you we'll be doing workings for it. That is where we are now. That's where we are now. So how do we get a factory overhead? To get a factory overhead, if we are absorbing the overhead using direct material cost, then we need to calculate the overhead recovery rate. Okay? Or the overhead absorption rate. And that is going to be what? Budgeted overheads divided by budgeted direct material cost times 100. So we go back to the budgeted information to pick what we have there. So what do we have there? Budgeted overheads is $400,000. And then budgeted direct material cost is $60,000. So we multiply that by 100%. Let's see what we got. So 400 over 60 times 100. Boom, that's going to be 666.67%. Okay, 666.67%. That is the overhead absorption rate. Remember, I told you the answer will be X% of what? Direct material cost. So for us to get the overheads that we're going to be bringing here to get a total cost of the thing, we're going to take 666.67% of the actual direct material cost. This is where the trick is. So the overhead absorption rate computed has to be expressed on the actual. The overhead absorption rate computed has to be expressed on the actual. So 666.67% of what? The direct material. So let's look at it. And so that is going to be 666.67% of 42,000. And I'm getting 280,001. That is the overhead. That is the overhead. So when you now add it, then you get a factory cost or production cost. So when we add that to 124,000, which is the prime cost, I'm going to get 404 and 1. That's what we mean. So in the preparation of the cost card or the cost sheet, that's what we're talking about. So the overhead that you are bringing to the cost card or the cost sheet, that overhead has to be what? Absorbed. And that overhead has to be absorbed using any of the bases, 6 bases that I've mentioned. But the first one we're looking at is what? The direct material cost. So assuming we are using direct material cost to absorb the overheads, this is how we go about it. Any questions, please? Put it in the chat box for me if you have any questions. You put it in the chat box for me if you have any questions. Then let's look at the second one. using direct labor cost. In using direct labor cost, the overhead absorption rate or the overhead recovery rate is the numerator doesn't change. So the total budgeted overheads, the same guy is going to be coming up, divided by the total budgeted direct labor cost times 100. Because it's a cost item, it has to be expressed in percentages. So that is going to be, again, X% of direct labor cost. Okay, X% of direct labor cost. So assuming we are using direct labor to absorb the overhead figure is going to be what? Different. The overhead figure is going to be different. Why? Because we will calculate the overhead absorption rate, and this time around it's going to be 400 divided by 100 times 100, and that's going to be 400%. So we'll take 400% of 82,000, and that becomes the overheads in that case. Ezekiel said, "Sir, I keep getting interrupted. Just hope I can rewatch or probably down this stream after all, so I am not left behind." Yeah, you can rewatch the playback if you keep being interrupted because you are doing something or something like that. You can always watch the playback. It will be available on the channel, so you can always get access to watch the playback. So that is it about direct labor cost. Then we come to the third one, and that is prime cost, right? Prime cost. With prime cost, the overhead absorption rate is going to be still, the numerator is going to be the same. Total budgeted overheads divided by total budgeted prime cost times 100. Okay, like I said, anything that is about the 100% will be what? Expressed in percentages. Sorry, anything that is a cost item will be expressed in percentages. So here, our answer is still going to be X% of prime cost. So this time around, you're going to be absorbing the overheads using prime cost. Okay, so I see a question coming from patients. Let's see. Practically, is that what happens on the grounds? How does this match up to cost generated on the one-man factory builder who is example into the production of nose marks? Yes, they are supposed to, if really they are doing something like that, these are how overheads are absorbed. These are how overheads are absorbed. So if the organization is doing something, or the organization is undertaking something, and it is looking at how it can absorb the overheads, then certainly that's how the overheads will be absorbed. Okay, so it is practically used, and that is how overheads are absorbed. So definitely the overhead absorption rate will apply usually to the various departments of the organization or the various production locations of the organization, and that will be used in order to find out how overheads can be absorbed. Then patience again is saying, what will be the motivating factor in choosing any of the six bases of absorbing to do that? Okay, so I'll be answering this question in a moment as we look at the issue in relation to, when we finish everything, I'm going to be answering your question, so you stay with me. What will guide whether we should use direct material, prime cost, or we should use the labor hours or machine hours? I'm going to be answering that question in a moment as we build up our knowledge on that. So that is the first three: using or absorbing the overhead, material cost, labor cost, and prime cost. Now let's look at the rest of the three, and that's going to be done in the middle here. Now, I am not doing the workings again to illustrate to you, but I hope virtually you have seen how the workings is supposed to be done in order for us to determine the actual cost that we need to calculate. So number 4, that is absorbing the overheads using labor, direct labor hours. So if we are using direct labor hours, all right. So if we are using, okay, so patient said many thanks, sir, you're welcome. So if we are using direct labor hours, what do? Overhead absorption rate will be equal to what? Still your numerator remains the same. So total budgeted overheads divided by total budgeted direct labor hours. Here you won't do times anything, okay? Here you won't do times anything. So your answer is going to be X dollars per direct labor hour. X dollars per direct labor hour. That's how your answer is going to be. So in that case, if we are calculating an overhead absorption rate, how do we go about it? In that case, if we are calculating an overhead absorption rate, how do we go about it? So look at it. So overhead absorption rate using the direct labor hours will be like this. So our numerator is 400,000. That is the budgeted overhead. It's still 400,000. But we divide that by the budgeted hours, which is 10,000 hours. And I think that should give you $40 per hour, I guess. 400 over 10 is 40, yeah. $40 per hour. So once you get a $40 per hour, if you want to determine the overheads that you are going to be absorbing on your cost sheet, you multiply this 40 by what? The actual labor hours, 8,200, and that will give you the overhead for that period. I hope you get it. Very simple, right? Straight to the point. So that is going to be X dollar per direct labor hour. Let's look at number 5. And number 5 is going to be using machine hours. And it's the same thing. So your overhead absorption rate is equal to, numerator remains the same, total budgeted overheads, divided by total budgeted machine hours. So again, what will be our answer? X dollars per machine hour. X dollars per machine hour. So you will do your computation, 400,000 divided by the budgeted machine hours, 20,000, right? And then the figure you get, or the rate you get, use it to multiply the actual machine hours of 15,000, and that will give you the overheads for the period. So that is the machine hour basis. Then the last one is going to be production unit. So absorbing the overheads using production units. So if we are absorbing the overheads using the production unit, what do? So overhead absorption rate is going to be equal to the total budgeted overheads, all right, divided by the total budgeted production units. Okay? So that in this case, our answer will become X dollars per production unit. X dollars per production unit. So that is how we compute the overhead absorption rate as well for the production unit. So with this case, it's going to be 400,000 divided by 25,000, which is the budgeted units. Then we'll get our rate. Then to get the actual overheads that we are going to be absorbing for the product, for the period under consideration, we'll multiply that by the actual unit of 27,500 hours. So these are the 6 bases of absorption of overheads. The 6 bases of absorption of overheads. Now to the question that patients asked about which of them should be used when and why, or what should be the motivating factor in deciding which of them that can be used. Number one, if the entity can measure reliably the output of the product, okay, so if outputs are measured reliably, then we can use the production unit to absorb the overheads. Also, if the entity is capital intensive, meaning they use a lot of equipment, they use a lot of technology, they use a lot of machines rather than human effort, then they would want to absorb the overheads using what? The machine hours, because the machines will be more intensive there or dominant there in our production process. Then, if the organization is not capital intensive, but it is labor intensive, we use a lot of manpower in the production of goods and services, then the entity may go for what? The direct labor hours. Okay, so can production units be measured? If yes, the entity might go for the production unit. Can we, or are we using more machine than labor? If yes, then they will use the machine hours. Okay, are we using more labor than machine? If yes, then they can use what? The direct labor hours. Then where it's not realistic for the organization to either measure the production unit or determine the machine hours or determine the labor hours, especially if it is a service organization, consultancy, and all of those things, then they would want to absorb the overheads either using the direct labor cost or the prime cost, or if you want, material cost, if that is possible. So these are the motivating factors as to which one must be used and when can it be used. So it all depends on how the company is structured. So patience, I hope I have answered your question for you on the factors that motivate which of the 6 bases can be used in order to calculate the overhead absorption rate. All right, so let me know. Okay, so patient said, many thanks, very well comprehended. Okay, that is fine. So these are the 6 bases for absorption of overheads. I'm gonna snap this as well and it will be posted on Instagram. All right. Okay, so these are the basis of absorption of overheads. Now, the final thing that you need to understand is the issue about blanket absorption rates and then departmental absorption rates. Okay, now the word blanket means what? What is a blanket? One thing used to cover maybe 2 people sleeping on a bed, right? So one thing will apply to everybody, but departmental overhead rates will be specific to each department. So when we say blanket overhead absorption rate, what it means is that with this one, the entity computes a single overhead absorption rate, and that overhead absorption rate is used by each department to absorb the cost. That is blanket overhead absorption rate. So we use one and it applies to all the department. That is blanket overhead absorption rate. However, we also have what is called departmental absorption rate. This is where the overhead absorption rate for each department is what? Computed. So that if the department is machine intensive, they will absorb it using machine hours. If the department is labor intensive, they will absorb it using labor hours. If the department can measure its output, especially in the factory department, then they can use what? The production hours. So blanket overhead absorption rate is where an entity computes a single overhead absorption rate, and that applies to all departments. However, departmental absorption rate is where each department uses specific overhead absorption rate in the absorption of its overheads for on the product, the process, or the undertaking. So basically, when we talk about overhead absorption or overhead, these are the things that you need to understand. Now, aside these, we also have what is called over absorption of overheads and then under absorption of overheads. Now, remember, since you are doing absorption costing, this guy is going to pop up every time, and you have to understand what is over absorption of overheads and what is under absorption of overheads. So let's talk about that briefly. Now, to decide whether overhead is over absorbed or under absorbed, the only thing you do is that you're going to be comparing the budgeted unit with the actual unit. You compare the budgeted unit with the actual unit. Where your budgeted unit is greater than your actual unit, we say that overhead has been over absorbed. But where your budgeted unit is less than the actual unit, we say that overhead is under absorbed. Okay, so determine whether overhead is over absorbed or under absorbed. You can compare the budgeted unit against the actual unit or the budgeted hours against the actual hours. So where the budget is more than the actual, that means we've budgeted more than what we are supposed to do. So for instance, let's give an example. Maybe the organization decided that they want to produce 20,000 units, but they actually ended up producing 15,000 units. Now, since they budgeted to produce 20,000 units, it means that the fixed overhead that they did that overhead in line with what? 20,000 units. Now that they have produced only 15,000, it means they have charged or they have budgeted more than they are supposed to do. Hence, we need to reduce it. So the difference of 5,000 will result into what is called what? Over absorption of overheads. And that 5,000 will multiply the overhead absorption rate and will be treated. Now, when there is over absorption of overheads, if we are preparing the cost sheet, it means that the cost has been increased. So over absorption of overheads will be deducted if we are preparing the cost sheets. But if you are preparing the profit statement, then you get sales, less cost of sales, you get gross profit. Now, if overheads are over absorbed, what it means is that your gross profit has been reduced. So if you are preparing the profit statement, you have to add the over absorption back to the gross profit in order to get the answer that you are supposed to get in there. So the reverse is true. If we have under absorption of overheads, meaning that our actual output is more than the budgeted. So if our actual is more than budgeted, then we've charged less than what we are supposed to charge. For that reason, if you are preparing the cost sheet or the cost card, the under absorption of overheads is going to be added back to the cost. Are you getting it? But if you are preparing the profit statement, then it means we have undercharged the cost. Hence, our gross profit has gone up. For that reason, we will deduct it from the gross profit. I hope you get an explanation very well. This is one of the areas that students struggle with, especially in dealing with profit statements, cost sheets, absorption of overheads. If you are doing marginal costing, there is nothing to think about under or over absorption. In marginal costing, you don't think about that. But immediately you are doing the absorption costing, quickly, you have to think about whether overheads are over absorbed or under absorbed. These are what you need to understand basically when we talk about accounting for overheads. So any questions for me real quick? Any questions for me real quick? Any questions for me? So overheads or accounting for overheads, these are the key things you must understand. Number one, allocation of overheads. Number two, apportionment of overheads. Number three, absorption of overheads. That is very, very important, and that is very, very key in that case. Then you must understand the issue about over absorption of overheads and under absorption of overheads. So if you have any questions, put it in the chat box for me. I'm going to be concluding around here today, and this is what I refer to as introduction to management accounting. So from Monday and then yesterday and today, tied up together to give us the foundation on what we need to understand when it comes to management accounting. And then most importantly, these will position you in order for you to be able to now do the bigger stuff, preparing the cost sheets, the profit statements, and all of that. Sika Williams said, thanks a lot, sir. Always prepare to deliver. Continue to stay blessed. It's a pleasure. Continue to stay blessed as well. Ezekiel said, sir, please, are these formulas provided during the exams or we need to memorize them? When ya papa, you need to memorize them. They are not provided, okay? Nothing will be provided to you. The only thing will be provided is the discounting factor. If you are the discounting table or present value table, annuity table, if you are dealing with investment appraisal, that will be provided for you. But in management accounting, these guys, you've got to know them, okay? So Ezekiel, and I think they are not hard to memorize, right? They are not hard to memorize. The numerator remains the same. So whatever you are doing, that is what will come at the denominator. So technically, they are not really difficult to memorize. So they will not be provided. You need to know about them before you enter the exam hall. All right. So any other questions for me? Any other questions for me? So I'll be concluding here today, like I mentioned, and God willing, tomorrow we will continue with our discussion based on our topic list. We will look at what else we need to cover tomorrow and Friday. So you continue to follow me on Instagram, and the details will be posted always there so that you will be able to know exactly what we're going to be doing for the day. Then you can schedule and then be part of it. Note that these contents will always be available on the channel, and you will be able to watch them back and back in that case. So that is it about that. Any inquiries that you have that you want to forward to or anything, you can reach out 050-114-9296, 050-114-9296. If you are outside Ghana, you add +233 to that, and that is the country code, and that will help you to reach us and then bring out any inquiry you have. Or maybe you want to study directly under my mentorship for the exams, join our class via Zoom or on campus. All of that, you can channel that to us in that case. Then there is also a second YouTube channel that we have created to be able to answer other questions that cannot be answered or on this channel at the same time. So you can check that channel also out, and it is the Nhyira Premium Show. So that it's a no YouTube channel, the Nhyira Premium Show. So that is our second YouTube channel, the Nhyira Premium Show. You can check it out and subscribe to the channel as well. We'll be sharing other information on that channel on entrepreneurship, marketing, like mostly about businesses and how practical some of these things are used by businesses and for entrepreneurs. So if it is something that you'll be interested in, you can check it out, the Nhyira Premium Show. The link will be in the description to this video, and you can also be part. I release videos on the channel on Monday, on Wednesdays, and on Fridays as well for that channel. So you can check that out as well, and then keep following me. So thank you very much, and I'll see you same time tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. or 16:30 GMT. Bye-bye.